Do you read or read? The difference between the two can be rather significant, especially when it comes to interpreting an electrical wiring diagram. Want to know more? Stick around. That's the topic for this edition of The Trainer. Hi, and welcome to the June 2018 edition of The Trainer. You know, reading can be defined in one of two ways. One, the action or skill of reading written or printed matter silently or aloud, and two, an interpretation. When you're reading an electrical wiring diagram, it is important that you're able to trace the circuit from point A to point B. But it's equally important that you're able to understand what is happening in the circuit between point A and point B. Here's what we're going to cover today. Your study of the wiring diagram isn't complete until you've identified these 5 key elements. Block diagrams try to make it easier on us by only including what is necessary. But who decides what is necessary? Block diagrams rarely complete the path back to the source. That's where these two come in. And finally, we'll read and analyze a typical wiring diagram using a GM cooling fan circuit as our example. If you find yourself struggling with electrical troubleshooting or reading a wiring diagram, I want you to pause the video right here. Go print out a copy of a 1995 Chevrolet Lumina VIN M as in Michael cooling fan circuit, grab a couple of highlighters, and then come on back and follow along. If you have any questions as we go, add them to the comment section of the video, whether it's here on YouTube or on motorage.com, and I'll do my best to follow up and answer any that you post. Every electrical circuit has these common elements. I know I'm not done with the wiring diagram until I've identified every one of them. First is the load. The load is the component doing the work. In this case, a light bulb. Second is the source of electromotive potential or voltage. Without one, we can't get electrons moving. The battery is one source of voltage and the one I reference when reading a wiring diagram. Third is the control device. Without this, the load would stay on all the time. Control devices can be located on either side of the load, that is, on the ground path or the positive path, and includes any component that completes the path needed for current flow. What examples can you think of? Fourth are the circuit protection devices. These are always located on the positive side of the circuit and are there to protect against accidental shorts to ground before the load. Fuses, circuit breakers, and fusible links are all circuit protection devices. And finally, we have to have a complete path from the source to the load and back again. Usually this means a wired connection on the positive side, but not always on the ground side. Now let's take a look at a simple block diagram. Block diagrams are designed to make reading the schematics a lot easier, but they have their disadvantages. They're built off the OEM schematics, and they only include the components and wiring that make up the specific circuit that you're working on. This example is the horn circuit on a 2014 Scion TC. They are also laid out the way you might think of current flow, with the positive side of the circuit towards the top of the diagram and the ground side of the circuit at the bottom of the diagram. The only problem is I don't see the source, that is the battery, on this diagram. How am I supposed to know that I've gotten all the way back to the battery? The horn diagram stops just short of the battery at the top of the page. See the fuse just above the horn relay? To find the path all the way back to the battery, you need to look at the other diagram, the power distribution diagram. There may be more than one. Look them all over and locate the horn relay fuse, the fuse that we saw on the horn diagram. There it is. Now from here, let's see if we can find the route back to the battery, shown in the upper left corner of the power distribution diagram. Okay, that has us back at the battery. Tracing the ground path back to the battery is similar and usually easier using the ground distribution diagram. This one shows the horn switch ground. But wait a minute, that's not the same as shown here, is it? Again, keep in mind that block diagrams are simplified diagrams. At first glance, you might think that the horn switch is grounded to the steering wheel, and that may be, but that still hasn't gotten us back to the battery, and that's eventually where we have to end up. Take a closer look at the two. See the designator Z21? That's a connector, and the numbers on the opposite side of the symbols indicate the cavity in the connector, in this case number 1 on the right, the one leading from the ECU to the switch, and number 6 on the left, completing the path to ground from the switch through the clock spring and finally to ground. Have I lost you yet? Don't worry, it'll all start to make sense as we continue along. But this might be a good place to take a break. So why don't you pause the video, take a short break, come back, and we'll start exploring that example diagram in depth. Hey, Pete Meyer here, Motor Age Magazine. You know, you've heard us talk all the time about the need for continuing education. How are you maintaining your education and competence in this field? Do you attend all of these live training events around the country? Odds are you don't. Do you rely on the Google and YouTube guys? That can lead you down the wrong path. Well, I got an answer for you. It's called Motor Age Training Connect. It's an online video platform that's customizable to fit your needs. Currently, there's over 350 videos in this portfolio, and there's 2 to 3 added every single month. The production quality is excellent. The animations are excellent. The trainers are experts in their field, and they're using the latest tools and technology to share these systems with you. Everything from fundamentals all the way up to advanced stuff, it's all part of Motor Age Training Connect. I invite you to learn more. Just log on to connect.motoragetraining.com. Okay, on to our example diagram. Do you have your copy ready? Now, the only reason we'd be doing this at all is to figure out why the loads aren't doing the work we want them to do. In this case, we must have a problem with one or both of the cooling fans. So let's continue as if we're tackling a customer concern that only one is not coming on when it should, and keep that concern in the back of our minds as we review the diagram. The first step is to identify the load or loads on the diagram. In this case, it's both cooling fan motors. Now, in order for this fan motor to work, I have to have a complete path between it and the source or the battery. So my next step is to trace back from the motor, the load, to the source, the battery. And I need to trace back on the ground side of that load and on the positive side of that load. Let's start by picking one of the fan motors and then one terminal on that motor. I choose engine cooling fan motor 1, and I'm going to start with the terminal labeled A. The letter designation, like the number designation on the horn circuit diagram, denotes the connector pin location. In some cases, the actual connector on the vehicle may have more wires in it than are shown on the diagram. Again, the block diagram only shows what is applicable to that particular circuit. As we follow the line from pin A, we see another abbreviation. In this case, it's BLK and represents the color of the wire. BLK for black. Now, if you're not sure what the designations mean, check your service information system. There should be a legend of all the color codes in the wiring section of the manual. And you might want to make sure you do that, especially when you're working on German products. Some of the German schematics bit me in the butt because the color codes were all in German. They didn't always line up with their English counterparts. Continuing to follow what we now know is a black wire, we reach this little dot and can easily see that it is intersecting with another black wire. You can also see that the second black wire is coming from engine cooling fan motor 2. So we'll continue tracing the path by following the now dashed line. All this means is that whatever the role of this dashed wire is, it's being shared by multiple components. And it doesn't take long to get to the end. The symbol shown here indicates ground, and we know from what we talked about earlier that this also means we've effectively worked our way to the ground side of the source, the battery. And that means we've successfully traced 1/2 of the fan circuit for both fans. But there's more here. See the G110? This identifies a specific ground point. The diagram also tells us that this ground point is located at the lower left front of the engine. So, what do we know so far? Well, we know that both fan motors are grounded through a black wire. These two black wires come together in a splice somewhere in the harness, and from there it's a single wire to the final ground point located on the left front of the engine. Our concern is one fan motor that's not working. If the ground wire was disconnected at G110, would that cause only one fan motor not to work? No, it wouldn't. If we disconnected the ground at G110, both fan motors, and likely several other components, would no longer work. You want to keep your customer's complaint in mind, the problem that you're troubleshooting, as you trace the diagram. We're only dealing with one fan motor, right? So if there is a problem on the ground side, I need to focus on what's unique to the ground path. In this case, it would be the wire from the motor to the splice. Any faults in the wiring from that point on would affect both motors. Now we need to complete our trace of the other half of this circuit. Let's go back to the cooling fan motor 1 and start following the second wire. This is a light blue wire and is in the B cavity of the fan motor connector. It doesn't take long to get to the first component, a relay. The wire we're following looks like it's coming from a switch, doesn't it? And that's all a relay really is, a switch. But here's a note for you. When you're looking at a block wiring diagram, any switch that you see is shown in what's considered its normal state or off state. In this case, you can see that the switch is open. But be careful, you may run into a time or two where the switch is closed in the off position. I also said earlier that I have to identify the 5 essential elements every circuit has. What have we identified so far? We've identified the load, the light bulb. We've identified the source, the battery. We've identified the path from the load back to the source. And now we've identified a control device, haven't we? But is that all a relay is? Let's keep tracing the path back to the battery, and we'll come back to that. When the relay switch closes, it connects the light blue wire to the red wire. Following the red wire now, it brings us to maxi fuse 3, a 60 amp fuse that, as the notation states, is hot at all times. That means there's voltage, even when the ignition key is turned off. The fuse is located in a shaded box with a dotted outline. The box indicates that all of these fuses are located in the same place. Looking over to the right a bit, and you can see the fuses are located in Underhood Electrical Center 1. If you don't know where that is, look for the component location index in your service information system. The dashed outline around the shaded box indicates that not all the components located in that junction box are shown on this diagram. But if we need to know or want to find out what's contained in that junction box and its final path back to the battery, we just go to the power distribution diagram. And that means we can mark that off of our essential elements list. And isn't the fuse a circuit protection device? You bet it is, so we can mark that one off as well. But we're not done yet. Now we have to go figure out what causes the relay switch to close. What is a relay? A relay is an electrically operated switch that is used in a variety of applications that require the control of a high current circuit by a low power signal. For example, by an electronic control unit like the engine control module. It also isolates the control and controlled circuits from one another. Well, we've identified the controlled circuit, haven't we? That would be cooling fan motor number 1. Now we have to go back and look at the control circuit of the relay. What causes the relay to be turned on and off? The diagram tells us how. Inside this relay is a coil with a diode wired in parallel. When current is passed through a coil of wire, a magnetic field is created. This magnetic field is used to close the switch. The diode is there to protect whatever low power control is in charge of this relay. When current to the coil is turned off, the magnetic field will collapse, and that will induce a voltage spike, or kick, that could travel back to the control unit and damage its internal driver. And that makes the coil in the relay a load, doesn't it? And that means we have a whole nother circuit to trace and another 5 essential elements to lock down. Starting at the coil, let's trace it back to the source. Let's start with the orange wire. That was easy. Straight to the fuse. That takes care of the path to the positive side of the source, and the circuit protection device. The other wire must be on the ground side then. This is the dark green wire, and it ends at the powertrain control module. So what does that make the PCM in this circuit? In the PCM, there's an electronic switch called a driver. In this case, when the driver closes, it completes the path to ground for the coil side of the relay. That in turn energizes the coil, creates a magnetic field, and closes the relay contacts, the switch. That completes the path for the cooling fan motor, and now the cooling fan will start. Now there's still something else we have to figure out. How does the PCM decide when to turn on or turn off that driver? Let's take another look at the diagram. There are 3 pins marked as relay controls. These are the drivers that turn on the relays shown in the diagram. The rest of the pins are related to the inputs from sensors or switches that tell the PCM what to do and when. And they are inputs you can see on your scan tool. So let's summarize what we've learned by tracing this diagram. When the conditions required for cooling fan operation are met, the PCM closes the appropriate driver, the relay is energized, and the fan comes on. We can learn more about what the conditions are by looking it up in our service information system. Take a moment and apply what you've learned so far and trace the circuit for cooling fan motor 2. Consider what the 2 fan motors share and what is unique to each while you're looking at it. Remember the complaint we're trying to fix? Only one fan works. How would you proceed in your troubleshooting from here? What test readings would you expect at various points on the diagram? And keep in mind, that may change when the circuit is turned on or off. Now that we understand how the cooling fan motor circuit is supposed to work, we can take that knowledge and apply it to the broken circuit that we're working on. The first step that I would do, I'd perform a voltage drop test right at the back of the fan motor, right at the connector. That would give me diagnostic direction and help point me to whether the problem was on the ground side or the positive side of the circuit. And from there, since only one fan is not working, I'd focus on what was unique to that circuit. In this case, we have a dedicated fan motor, a dedicated fuse, a dedicated relay, and a dedicated driver in the PCM, as well as the wiring that connects them all together. Now, if my initial voltage drop test indicated a problem on the ground side, that would be relatively easy. I think I would focus on taking a look at that ground wire from the connector to the splice, because that's the part of the circuit that's unique, right? But what if the problem were on the positive side of the circuit? What would you do as part of your troubleshooting process? I'd really like to know. I want you to leave your comments down in the comments section, either at YouTube or at motorage.com. I'll also answer any questions that you have concerning the video today, and I hope that it was of help to you. We're going to pick up this topic again in a future edition, but until then, thanks for watching.